this. Some of you may have internet problems, some of you may have technical difficulties, everything. So you have time. You have 1 week, but it's a big exam. You need to at least spend a whole day on it. Please, please, please don't leave it to the last minute. After this deadline, I will not extend it because it's extremely unfair to other students. This is it. If you miss this deadline, you miss the midterm. Please make sure you don't miss the deadline. You need at least a full day, at least. For some of us, 2 days, 3 days. I don't know, start very early so that you know what you're doing. You have 7 questions and 1 writing assignment. The questions are start very easy. These are just everything we already covered in class. The concept of opportunity cost, trade. We're going to come to that. We have trade here. We have equilibrium. We have elasticities. We have a discussion question. And question 7, it basically covers everything we've covered in chapters 8 and 9, tax and trade. In part B, remember the world price is $20 now. I'm basically asking you to play the role of a government employee who is trying to raise revenues by imposing taxes on tariffs. Till now, we've been working with how to study how much government revenues we can raise, but now you're going to look at this problem from the eyes of a government employee. Now you have a certain revenue that you need to raise at least. You need to raise at least this much money, either by taxing these people in the market or by putting a tariff on foreign imports from Japan in this case, or by a combination of both, which is your last part. Now, in your question 8, which is a writing assignment, I want you to write 200 words criticizing one of these 2 papers. One paper is about rent control. The other one is about free trade. You can choose one of them. You don't need to do both of them. If you're interested in rent controls, you can argue against this paper and say that, okay, they forgot this, they didn't mention this. Use your economic knowledge and stick to economics, please. Only economics here. And you can argue for every position that you like. You're completely free in this. Just stick to economics and use the tools that we have learned so far. Use your innovation and be creative. Try to think outside the box. Just try to think as an economist and defend your own interests or the positions that you think is correct by, for example, criticizing this paper that says US needs China more than China needs the US. You can use historic data. For example, you can say, okay, you're wrong because in 2013 something happened that proves this paper wrong. Or you can say, okay, how many jobs are lost in the US versus how many jobs are lost in China. You can use this kind of arguments. In this part, you can say, but people can save money, things like that. You're completely free. Do your little research, try to learn, try to listen to the other side of this argument, those who defend this rent control policies. Try to listen to other people who reject rent control policies. Same applies here. If you're interested in trade and you don't really like free trade, for example, you can listen to other people who reject free trade. Like, for example, you could go to Bernie Sanders' campaign website. They have this excellent argument against free trade. Or you can go to Donald Trump's website. I'm pretty sure they have the, last time was 2016, I checked. They have this excellent argument against free trade. If you want to reject it, you can also go other places, like pretty much everywhere else. You have excellent arguments defending free trades. So you have everything. When you have internet, you have everything. You just need working internet, a phone, laptops to do your research. I don't want anything too serious, but do your best and make sure you include your sites, your references. If you quoted from somewhere, I want to see that you mention this. You don't need to follow a certain format like APA format, American Psychological Association format, or other formats. I just want you to say, okay, I took this from this person. I don't really care about the format and the structure of your writing. I'm pretty sure you can learn this stuff from your other professors much better than me, just a graduate student. So only focus on your economic knowledge. And what else? Yeah, when going through your midterm, remember all the rules of plagiarism and just not using other people's work in your midterm when you're answering questions. Don't copy other people's work. These are laws, and I'm obligated to report you. Please don't make me do that. It's the last thing I really want to do, is just to send an email and like, boss, this student like did something bad and things like this. This is the last thing I want to do. Trust me on this. Please don't make me do this, please. And it will cause a lot of troubles for you. So I really don't want to even think about that. So we established that. Okay, let's move. Now, another part, which is how to turn in your midterm. Yes. On your Moodle, on the Moodle page, there is a tutorial, this one here, how to convert photos to PDF. I uploaded it last night. I need your work to be submitted as a document with PDF format. You have 1 week, because last time my students, they use different formats. I had to get a computer degree just to convert all these formats to something that works on my PC. And even then I couldn't do it. Like sometimes I had to use some photos on my phone. The other ones were like in different formats that I had to ask my friend back home to actually help me read what the student has said. So only PDF, please. When you take pictures on your phone, if you're happy to write with your hand on a piece of paper, that's perfectly fine. I can read your handwriting if it's not like too artistic. Please limit your artistic expression on the exam. If you're preferred to draw with your hands, your graphs with your hands, you can always use a piece of paper, then take pictures with your phone and use that tutorial to convert those pictures to a PDF document. Then you can type, let's say question 8, and you can merge the two documents together as one PDF. You can merge the two documents together as one PDF. One part would be the pictures you've taken from, let's say, question 3, which you solved with your hands. The other part would be the essay you wrote from question 8, for question 8. You merge them all together in one document, and you're good to just upload it and send it to me. So should we handwrite our graphs and then upload a picture of it? Yes, you can do it if you're more comfortable doing this. I'm perfectly fine, as long as you convert it to a document so that I can access it easily. Any more questions about the midterm? You'll have 1 week and it's open book, so I'm pretty sure you'll do fine. If you had any problems, like things that happened, you didn't do a terrific job on your first midterm, don't worry. You'll get a second midterm before semester is over, and you'll also get a final exam. So don't stress yourself too much. So the midterm covers chapters 1 to 9 technically. Yes, exactly. Chapters 1 to 9. Like tomorrow after we talked about our midterm, we're going to start chapter 10. Chapter 10 will not be on your midterm 1. It will be on your second midterm, which will be a much smaller exam. And chapter 1 to 9, that's all you need to worry about. So I think we covered everything here. So the exam is open book, so it'll be easier. Most of these questions, these are the questions that you actually see on a conventional exam when you have limited time and no access to any textbook or anything. So don't worry about it. But one thing I remembered, if you have like a severe problem, a technical issue, like no access to computers or anything, or if you know one of our classmates, for example, right now is living through a hurricane and he and she cannot have access to internet or anything, make sure you tell me. If you know any of your friends who has this kind of problem, and of course he likes to talk about this with me, and you have his permission or her permission to tell me, or you yourself have this issue, make sure you tell me, because I'll arrange something else. I'll find a way. I understand that this is like, right now, nothing is normal. I'm sitting in my pajamas at work. This is not normal. I get it. So don't worry yourselves. We've already suffered a lot of mental health crisis in the last 6 months, being in shutdown and quarantine. Don't make it worse. Any more questions? I covered everything I wanted to cover. Do you have any questions? All right, no questions. Let's move to chapter 10. Okay, chapter 10. This chapter is about a nation's income. Pretty sure you've heard on the news and the TV and the radio that the US economy grew by 3% last year, or the economy contracted by 10% last year. Or if that person wins the election, the economy will grow by 10%. Or if that person wins the election, the economy will contract by 2%. Why this? What does this number mean? This 2%, 3%, 4%. What do we talk about when we talk about the economy? The economy will grow. We're talking about the nation's income. Every nation can be treated as a family, like we're all a member of this nation. We all work. Some of us work and some of us don't work. It's like a family. If you put all the incomes together, let's say my family, like when I was growing up. My mom was a high school teacher, my dad was an engineer, they were both working, and me and my siblings, they were consuming. We weren't working, we were consuming what they worked for. If you put together all their income, that's the family's total income. Same thing applies for a nation, applies to a nation. When we put together the income of every single person in the society, that's our national income. Now, before we were focusing mainly on microeconomics, which is the study of firms and households and their interactions in markets, how they make decisions, when should I buy, when should I stop buying something, my consumer surplus, my producer surplus, how I'm affected by this policy, how I'm profiting from this, how am I not profiting from this. Now we're studying macroeconomics. It's the study of economy-wide phenomena. From now on, we get serious about macroeconomics, economy-wide phenomena, like inflation. Why does prices keep going up? Like, I'm pretty sure my dad went to like school and his tuition was like $500 per semester. Same for my mom. Her college tuition was like $500 per semester. Why for me it's about $15,000? Why the prices kept going up all these years? Unemployment. Why I can't find a job as easily as my dad did, or why I can't find a job much easier than my dad did. Like my dad had to spend time looking for a good job, travel around the country. All I can do, all I do is just to upload a resume and they contact me. I can easily go give an interview, find a job. Finding a job is much easier now. And economic growth. When we talk about, for example, the country's GDP grew by 2%, 3%, people are happy. But if the country's GDP is contracted by 10%, everybody is angry. Why? In order to study how an economy is doing, how an economy is doing, in general, to get a big picture, some number that we can judge a president's work or a politician, a prime minister, or a political party, the best tool available to us to judge that person, how he did, how she did during her or his term, is gross domestic product. It measures total income of everyone in the economy. Gross domestic product. Total income of everyone, not only Americans, but also other nationalities in American economy. For example, right now, I'm a foreigner. I'm not an American citizen, but I'm working here. I'm being paid, I'm paying taxes. I'm part of the American economy. I'm not part of Americans. I'm not an American citizen, but I'm part of American economy. Therefore, my income is measured in the gross domestic product. It also measures total expenditure on the economy's output of goods and services. If you've taken accounting classes and all those numbers, I was really bad at them. Like I always missed one number, made a mistake, and I never got accounting correct. It needs focus. When you're doing accounting, at the end of your period, your income must equal your expenditure. Gross domestic product is basically a nation's accounting. Your total income equals your total expenditure. Income equals expenditure. Just like a company, at the end of the year, you cannot have cash sitting on your desk. You have to get rid of everything you've made. If you made profits, you have to give the profits to your shareholders. You don't hold them. The company doesn't hold profits in itself, gives it to the shareholders. If you made a loss, you have to borrow money from someone to cover the loss. So at the end of the year, 0, 0. You're left with nothing. Income equals expenditure. The same, excuse me, the same accounting principle is applied to a country. For the economy as a whole, income equals expenditure. Because every dollar a buyer spends is a dollar of income for the seller. Now, remember this circular flow diagram we talked about in the first few lectures? I told you that this is like too simple. You don't need to know it. You just don't worry about it. You won't, I mean, you need to know it, but you won't be questioned on this diagram on the exam. Why? This is a very good diagram. It has firms, it has households, markets for goods and services, markets as a factor of production, and all the connection. What connects a firm to a household? The labor the household provides, the wages the firm pays, the profit the firm pays, the capital the household provides. All of these are connected to each other. But there is a small detail missing here. Look at this diagram. There is a small detail here. The small detail is the government, which is not small. The government is just the giant. And many economists, and many other people, they wished this circular flow diagram was true, that we had no government. But unfortunately for them, and many more, sometimes even for me, the government exists. The government is a huge part of the economy. It's right there, spending money, buying all these military stuff from companies, employing all these people from households as soldiers, law enforcement, firefighters, government employees, DMV employees. Whenever you go to the DMV, these are people from households that the government is employing. So the government is the elephant in the diagram, which is ignored often. What this diagram omits, the government, which collects taxes, of course, taxes, buys goods and services and employs people. The financial system, there is no bank here. There is no financial system here. What's the financial system? Financial system is basically a market for money. Imagine two people like my parents. They worked their whole life. They saved, they raised their kids. Now the kids, they're independent, so they don't need to really worry about them. So they have all these savings. All these years they went to work, 30 years, 35 years, they worked every day. Now they have all this money saved. Can they just dump all this cash in their living room? No. They take it to the bank. They put it in a bank. Now, what does the bank do with the money? When a young couple who are like exactly like my parents or your parents, like a few years later, when my parents just started going to work, they were young, they wanted to buy a house, they didn't own a house, so they went to the bank, they borrowed money. Where did the money come from? From another old couple who saved their money in the bank. It's the most, the simplest way to explain the financial system. The financial system connects the money which belongs to people who don't need it right now to people who need it right now in exchange for an interest, or some interest. The interest is paid by the young couple want to buy a house. My parents, 35 something years ago, paid to the bank, and the old couple, my parents today, who own the money. This way, we can stimulate growth in the economy. Otherwise, young people would never be able to buy a house. And when they're old, they will not have saving because they have to spend on rent all those years. And there is no incentive for the person who builds houses to actually build houses because no one can afford it. So it's just, it will become like the medieval times. Everybody just sits in the same house, generation after generation, nothing changes. But thanks to the financial system, now we're able to connect people who need money to people who have money, make the economy grow, make them able to buy houses, to buy businesses, to grow. So we covered government, financial system. Now the last one is the foreign sector. Of course, in this diagram, everything is domestic. Workforce are all Americans, companies are all Americans, goods and services sold Americans, goods and services bought Americans. But is it really realistic? Look around you. From China, from Japan, I think that'd be like made in France. Everywhere like this desk, IKEA or something, it's like Swedish. Lots of foreign trade around us. Lots of foreign trade. So there is a huge foreign sector. There is a huge foreign sector. Trade goods and services, financial assets, and currencies with the country's residents. The foreign sector is important. We need to consider it. How can we consider everything, but then be as simple as we can? How can we consider as many things as we can by being as simple as we can be simple? By using gross domestic product. Nobody likes this. Trust me, nobody likes this, but it's better than every other alternative. It's the index that we use to measure a nation's income. The market value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a given period of time. That's the definition. Each component of this definition have tons of research behind it. Each component has tons of research behind it. The market value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a given period of time. 5 parts, each one of them very important. Let's study each part. First, the market value. Why do we care about the market value? Goods are valued at their market prices. Why? I mean, why don't we care about the time that people work? Why does a CEO has more value than a simple employee who works even harder? Probably sometimes. Most CEOs are workaholics. They work like 20 hours a day, like 18 hours a day. But then let's assume the CEO we're talking about is actually not a workaholic and works like 8 hours a day. But the simple employee, the frontline employee, the cashier, something like that, works even harder than the CEO, but it's not paid as much. Why don't we focus on the time people work, the hardships that they have to suffer to produce things? Why do we have to focus on US dollars? Is the dollar everything? These are very good questions and are being actually talked about. That perhaps we should focus on the human value or the value of every worker in the economy. But why don't we do it? Because by focusing on market value, we include all the complexities of markets. Market value is a very simple thing on paper. On paper, it's something it's just $100. But if you go deeper, that $100 implies all the people's needs, all these people who work hard every day to find newer technologies, to reduce costs, to advertise, to talk to people, to negotiate for better trade deals. $100 price tag represents a world of information, a network of professional men and women working day and night to produce something. When we focus on the market value, we focus on, first of all, what people actually like to consume, what people need. Are we producing something that people like to consume, or are we just producing something that no one wants? Is it really important what we're doing? Is it really important? Or no, we're just wasting our time. In every country people work, people in the United States, which is the biggest economy in the world, work. People in poorer countries also work. But in poorer countries, they don't produce what people really need or really value. But here in the United States, the worker, by working 8 hours, produces something that people really need and are happy to pay a lot of money for it. So that's why what the American economy is doing is more important than what poorer countries doing, for example. Very good example to demonstrate the importance of market value. If you talk to your parents about like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there used to be this country called Soviet Union. It's a huge country. And that country had this special communist economic system which didn't attach any value to actually market value. In the Soviet Union, market value wasn't really important because there was not like a market. There wasn't a market, but it wasn't like the ones we have here. So what happened was that there was no really there was not really a feedback from customers to producers. I watched this documentary. Remember, I was little. I watched this documentary on TV about these. There were these companies in Soviet Union which produced fur and pelts from foxes. If you watch these old photos, you can see that rich upper class people are wearing these fur coats and these hats that have like a animal tail attached to it, and like they considered this very luxurious 50 years ago, 30 years ago maybe. But it's no longer in fashion. And it was out of fashion for a long time. All those companies in, let's say, Siberia, I'm not sure. They kept producing these furs and pelts and making hats and coats and all these clothes from these poor animals and shipping them to Moscow, for example, and other Soviet cities. There, all these hats and furs and coats were put in inventories and then sent to the market to be bought by the people. But then people stopped buying them. No one liked to buy an animal part attached to his hat. No one liked that. People stopped buying that. The demand fell. No one liked it. So they kept stockpiling all these furs for years. No one bought them, and no one bothered to tell those companies that, guys, you're wasting your time. Stop raising these poor foxes and then turning them into hats and coats. No one likes this. You're wasting your time. No one bothered to tell them because there was no market value. There was no dollar that can speak to people. Money talks. The dollar speaks to us. Do people really like this? If the price is going up, yes. If the price is going down, it's talking to us. It's advising us. It's telling me that, Ahad, you're wasting your time. You're not appreciated in this business. Do something else. Change your job. Change what you're doing. Learn from these prices. If you're not being paid right now an adequate salary, change your job. Learn new skills. The money is talking to you. Listen to the money. But then over there was no market value. So these companies, they kept producing. For years, they were wasting all those efforts, all those investments, all those land and buildings and electricity and energy that could have been used to produce something that people actually want. They all wasted. And at the end, they had to, because the inventories were all full, they had to just burn all these hats and coats and just nothing. There were thousands of people just wasting their time all the time. That's why market value is very important. Really like this. I just came up with this quote, money talks, listen to it. Good for me. It's like something that I'll have to use in my future lectures as well. Goods are valued at their market prices. So all goods measured in the same unit, dollars in the US. Things that don't have a market value are excluded. Housework you do for yourself, for example. There are some really good criticisms coming at this specific definition as well. Even though it's a beautiful thing and it has lots of wisdom, it has a lot of flaws in it as well. Think about this. A parent or two parents. Now, these parents, they work. And they also have kids. They have children. They pay for childcare. One of the parents could be the mom or the dad or just the parent, making money and spending a portion of his or her salary on childcare. I'm making, let's say, $1,000 every month, let's assume, and I'm spending $500 of this on childcare. Everything here has market value. But then, what if one of the parents decides that I want to raise my own kids? I would drop out of the workforce. I would stop working. I would stop hiring childcare for my children, and I would raise my children myself. That has value, equal at least to the childcare service that they were paying before. They were paying $500 a month to someone to look after their children. Now they're doing it themselves, so it has some market value. This is a valuable task. Raising children is a valuable task. But then it's not in the GDP because there is no money being exchanged. My dad didn't actually pay my mom to raise us, or my mom didn't pay my dad to raise us. When my dad had to tell me a story to go to sleep, my mom didn't actually pay him to do it. But it was a valuable thing to do. So these are really good criticisms against the market value. It negates many useful tasks that people perform in the economy. Housework. When I clean my own house, I'm doing something valuable. Why it's valuable? Because if I hire someone, I have to pay him or her $100 to just clean the house. So I'm doing something which is valuable, housework. There was an article in the New York Times, I think 2 years ago. They said that they actually calculated all the housework that women, like it's usually used to be that way, like at least that women were responsible for doing the housework. So what the New York Times did was to calculate all these times and efforts on average. An American woman spent in the house cleaning and cooking and raising children, and then compare it to the current that times dollar value of someone who would be paid to do this, and then said, okay, U.S. economy, women contributed $2 trillion, something like that. It was a huge number. Of course, the number was debatable, but then they came up with this number. There was a huge number of all the time and effort spent by women in the last 50 years, cooking, cleaning, and raising children, which wasn't part of the gross domestic product. And they said, look, this is important. Don't miss it. Women contributed to the economy and they were ignored. So that's a very good article. Another thing that is gaining importance, the environment. How much did you pay for the clean air you just breathe? Let me breathe in. Free. Oxygen is free. But is it really without value? Can I live without oxygen? I'm just breathing. How much did you pay for it? How much did you pay for this tree outside your house, which is a beautiful thing? You wake up in the morning, you make yourself some coffee, you just enjoy watching the outside of your house. There are trees, birds, like it's a beautiful world. How much did you pay for it? Nothing. But doesn't it have any value? If there was like a garbage dump, wouldn't you be hurt? Yes. So environment has value. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the clean roads that we walk on when you go jogging. All of these have value, but they're not included in the gross domestic product. There is this professor in Carnegie Mellon University. I took part, I was in one of his conferences. He's a great guy. He's super brilliant, really like him. His work is great. And he has this argument, which he calls the green GDP. In that argument, he is including the value of clean air and like clean environment by studying the health effects of people who suffer poor environmental effects. Like, for example, if there is like really bad air, polluted air, I get sick. Then I have to go to the hospital. I have to spend money. That hospital bill would be the value of the clean air I've lost. Of course, the whole thing is much more complicated, just trying to simplify it. So environment, housework, things like that, not included in the market value, and that's a problem. GDP includes all items produced in the economy and sold legally. When something is illegal, even though people could spend a lot of time like producing something legal. Like 1930s, there was this movement in the United States that prohibited use of alcohol. And even though thousands of people spent time and effort producing alcohol, distributing them, people bought them, people like underground drank and like entertained themselves. and it all had value, but because it was illegal, it wasn't included in the GDP. After it became legal, suddenly all that alcohol market and all that distribution and production overnight became legal. It became part of the GDP. Something must be legal to be included in the GDP. The same arguments today are being used for legalizing marijuana and pot and hemp and CBD. Like they're really good at creating names for all these stuff, and I can't keep up. But they're basically saying the same thing. They're saying that if you include them, if you legalize them, then the economy will go up because now there'll be all these markets will be legal and it will be part of the GDP. GDP excludes most items produced and sold illicitly. It also excludes most items that are produced and consumed at home. If I make myself a milkshake, it won't be part of the GDP, even though it would be fantastic, it would be awesome, because I'm really good at it. If I buy the same milkshake from a business across the street, it will be included in the GDP. That's the problem. The market value of all final goods. Why do we care? Why do we focus on final goods? Final goods are intended for the end user. Final good is this. I use it. I talk, I watch memes, I watch cat videos. I use this. Of course, I check my emails and my bank account and insurance and everything. So it's a final good. What about the display? What about the memory? What about the SIM card? What about the Wi-Fi? What all like the antenna? All these. This has thousands of parts in it. This has thousands of parts in it. This simple phone. Those thousands of parts are intermediate goods. Their value is already reflected. When I pay $500 or $1,000 or any money, any amount to buy this phone, this means that I'm also paying for the memory. I'm also paying for the charger, for the display, unless I'm buying an iPhone. If you're buying an iPhone, you have to pay for charger and headphones separately. So that was a joke on people who buy iPhones. So all those parts are already included in the price. Intermediate goods are the memory, the CPU, the RAM, the antenna, the display, which are used as components or ingredients in the production of other goods. They're also included. What happens if I also include intermediate goods in the GDP? I'll end up double counting. If I add the value of the display and the phone itself, I'm double counting the value of display because the display is already included in the phone. GDP only includes final goods. They already embody the value of the intermediate goods used in their production. Any questions? I'm talking too fast, I know, but some of you may already not feeling real great. Great, let's move on. The market value of all final goods and services. What we buy are not always goods. Goods are tangible. This is tangible, we can see it. Sometimes they're not tangible, they're intangible. We can't see them. It's their service, like the insurance health. Where is my insurance health? I paid a lot of money for it. Where is it? Is there a doctor hiding in the closet so if I get sick, jumps out and save me? No, it's a promise that when you go to the doctor, we'll pay a tiny portion of your bill. Just kidding. We'll cover a portion of your medical costs. That promise is a service. It has value. It's something, even though you're not seeing this, I'm not seeing Jake from State Farm right now, but he is there. His promise has value. If I have a car accident, they'll probably cover it. So that is valuable. That's a service, even though it's intangible. The market value of all final goods and services produced within a country. We're talking about what we produced this year. When we talk about the GDP of 2020, we're only talking about what we produce in 2020. If we produce something in 2020, in 2019, like a car, it happens in the automobile industry a lot. You produce a car, it's a 2019 Ford Focus, for example. Somehow, no one buys it. It remains in your inventory. Next year, someone comes and buy it. It won't be the GDP of 2020. It will be the GDP of 2019 because it's produced in 2019. People were paid to work on it in 2019. Taxes were paid by the Ford Corporation to the US government in 2019. Everything happened in 2019. So the GDP of 2019 covers that car. GDP includes currently produced goods, not goods produced in the past. Very important. When we talk about the GDP, we talk about all the final goods and services produced within a period of time, their market value within a country. We're talking about the borders of a country, within the borders of a country. Why? Because it's something that's under our control. When you're inside the United States, you're living under jurisdiction of the United States government. You're subjugated to the laws of the United States government. You have to pay your taxes to the United States government. You'll have to enjoy the technology of the United States, stockpile of technology. You're basically part of this system. So if I focus on studying what happens within a country, I can judge the behavior of the people who write the laws and the regulations for the said country. That's why we use gross domestic product. There is a similar index. It's called gross national products, GNP. That covers the market value of all final goods and services produced within the citizens of a country. Instead of within the borders of a country, within the citizens, by the citizens of a country. Why do we care about GDP more than GNP? Because GDP enables us to judge the politicians, to judge the economists at the federal, working for the Federal Reserve, to judge our companies, because they're here. They're under our control. The difference between GDP and GNP is that I, a foreign citizen who works inside the United States and pays taxes to the US government, I am included in the GDP. But an American citizen who was born here in Raleigh, was raised here, went to school here, but currently is working in Japan, doing the same job, is a graduate student at the University of Tokyo, teaching Japanese students economics. That person, even though he or she is an American citizen, is not part of the GDP. It's not domestic. He or she is part of GNP of the United States. I am not part of that. I'm not an American, so I'm not part of a GNP, but I'm part of a GDP because I live within the borders of the United States. The decisions made by the US government affects me. So that's why we care about this. GDP measures. GDP measures the value of production that occurs within a country's borders, whether done by its own citizens or by foreigners located there. And of course, we talk about the market value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a given period of time. We focus on a given period of time because different periods, different seasons, for example, are different. Summers and winters, they have different characteristics. In farming, in tourism, during summer, I like to go to South Carolina. I like to visit Charleston. I like to go to the beach. I like to just relax, read a book, just be calm and enjoy the weather and the sea and everything. But in the winter, I'm not going to Charleston, to the beach. I'm not going into the water. I'm scared of those waves. The beach is not as fun as it is in summer. In summer, tourism is at peak compared to winter. In winter, people work and work and work, but they don't travel that often. So we cannot compare a summer to a winter. We want to compare a summer to a summer or a winter to a winter. That's why many quarterly GDP measures are used. Also, when you study a whole year and compare it to another year, you automatically include the summer, the winter, the fall, and the spring. So this is why we focus on a given period of time. It enables us to focus on the different characteristics of that period of time. Okay, I think I covered everything here. And last thing for today is the legend, the formula, the most important thing in this class. The only thing that I really need you to remember forever after leaving this class is this. This is the formula for the GDP. If you don't know this formula by the time you finish this course and even a year after, that means I'm a really ineffective teacher. This formula, very simple, just a few letters and words, doesn't tell us anything special, but it represents a lot. It represents everything we've covered so far and everything we will cover for the remainder of this course. The formula has different components. 4 components for a GDP. First of all, it's about total spending. So what do you spend your money on? The main answer is always consumption. I spend money on buying groceries, food I literally consume. Cell phone I use, therefore I'm consuming it. Tablet, I'm using it, so I'm consuming it. Insurance, I'm using it. I have an insurance card in my wallet, therefore I am consuming insurance. Consumption. All of this. Investment, what I'm not consuming, I'm saving. What I'm not consuming, I'm saving. I'm putting my money in the bank, I'm saving it so that it's invested into a family who want to buy a house as their mortgage, or into a young business owner who wants to open a business and expand his or her business. These are all investment. It's investment on, not in. Government purchases, government purchases. All these, look around you, all the airplanes, the tanks, helicopters, ships, aircraft carriers, submarines, huge, huge part of the economy is the military expenditure. They all are purchased by the government. All the workers, people at the DMV, they're government employees. Government purchased their labor. Government purchased their time. All the soldiers, all the officers, the law enforcement, the firefighters, civil servants, bureaucrats, all of them, government purchases. These are actual things that government buys, even time. When I'm a government employee, the government is buying my time from me. 8 hours every day, the government is buying my time. Therefore, is buying something. What's not government purchases, remember, Social Security payments. Social Security payments are not government purchases. Government is not buying anything or spending money on anything. Government is transferring the ownership of money from itself to me. When my Social Security card is charged, let's say $200, that means that the government transferred $200 to me. Now, what I do with that $200 is important. If I buy something, that's consumption. If I buy groceries, that's consumption. So government purchases, remember, real stuff, military equipment, schools, teachers, employees, people whose times are bought by the government. These are government purchases. Net exports, very important. Net export is basically all your exports, what you've given to other countries, they're gone from your country, minus what you've taken from them. That's the net value of all the goods and services that you sent outside. For United States, I'm pretty sure this number is negative, which means United States is importing more. It's importing more than what's it's exporting. Why? Because the country is very rich, consumption is very high, investment is high, the government is spending a lot of money. They can cover their negative net exports. But China, for example, has a very positive net exports. Their exports are a lot. They export a lot of material outside while importing only a tiny bit. But then their consumption, investment, and government purchases are not as big, so it would be covered. And covered net exports. And the final formula for GDP is Y equals C, consumption, plus I, investment. What you didn't consume, you save, plus G, what the government spent on buying things, plus net exports, what you sold to the foreigners or you bought from them. These are the four components of GDP, which the letter Y represents the word yield for the GDP. That's it. This represents everything we've learned so far. Our consumption, all those consumer surplus, producer surplus, all those things we covered so far on like what happens if you tax them, what happens when you tax something, you transfer from consumption to government purchase, represent expenditures, but then market activity would go down, so this would go down. All those complexities are represented here. Chapter 4, Chapter 5, elasticities represented here. Investment is what we'll cover for the remaining part of this chapter. Savings and monetary policy and bond markets and stock market, which is not investment. Remember, stock market is not investment. It's just the ownership of something. You're just transferring money in exchange for ownership. You're not investing when you're buying stocks. Government purchases, tax, tariffs, we covered them. All those things are in government expenditures. Net exports, trade, free trade, all the talk of chapter 3 and chapter 9, they're here. So all these different parts, each one of them represents all the homeworks that you've done, all the times that you've spent reading the textbook, all the times that you've spent being dragged into my lectures and listening to my never-ending talk about things. They're really important, each one of these parts. So the 4 components. Now, I think, yeah, we're almost out of time. So next time we're going to cover each component of this formula separately. Consumption, investment, we already talked about it a little. Remember, chapter 10 is not on your midterm exam, so you're not responsible for it. And that's it. If you have any questions, I'm here. You can ask me about your midterm, about anything. Also, you can email me and ask for office hours, but remember, before you go, don't flee. I know you're tired. Just wait a second. I cannot answer you the answers to questions. I cannot give you that. You understand, please? When you ask me that in question 7, what should we do? It's an open book exam, so I won't be able to give you an answer. But I'll do my best to help you. If you, for example, ask, what does the elasticity even mean? Or like, I couldn't understand this from chapter 5 when we talk about the price elasticity of demand and how it represents something. Then I'll do my best to answer that question. Remember, again, I have like 100 students. If any one of you ask me a question, that would be like 100 emails every day. I may not be able to answer in time. So if there are a lot of questions, I'll have to organize an office hour so that I can answer all your questions. And that's it. Again, don't worry about your midterm exam. Just do your best. Don't worry, you'll get the second chance in your second midterm, and you'll get a third chance in your final exam. And of course, you got your homeworks, and you can take part in lectures when you're supposed to on your group days to enjoy a bonus for attendance, and also the bonus questions that I occasionally put on the Moodle. You can see them as well. That's it. Don't worry about it. And if you have any questions for homework chapter 7, I try to answer. I hear you. I'll respond to this later. Any more questions? You're welcome. Thank you. Have a nice weekend. If there's any questions, you can ask. If not, yep. Have a nice weekend, everyone.